So the name's Matthew. I am, or used to be, the product manager for Semantic Kernel. I am now the product manager for Azure AI Agents, which is something that Microsoft will be announcing at Ignite in just a couple weeks. So keep an eye out for that. But I still love Semantic Kernel. It's been the best team I've ever worked on. I joke the only reason I left is because I love running into a fire. So that's where I'm at right now. So that's why I'm still here speaking, preaching, just how awesome, how easy it is to use Semantic Kernel. I guess the show of hands, have anyone used it before? Newbies? Okay, we have one. Woo, okay, cool. Great. That's what this session's for. It's the 101. It's getting started. It's seeing how it kind of works. How many of you have used OpenAI APIs, or maybe even Google or AWS? Okay, we have a couple hands. Okay, a decent number of y'all. Just chatbots doing any automation yet? Yes? No? Okay, some automation. Okay, cool. So get excited. We're going to build ourselves a really quick chatbot that's going to do some basic actions for us. And what I want y'all to take away from this is, one, it's easy. Don't be afraid of AI. I know it can seem scary, but it's just API calls. Y'all are really great at making requests to APIs. Y'all can do this. And two, kind of show you what's possible. I'm assuming a lot of you have seen, like, oh, we're just going to build another chat client, right? What I find remarkable about these AIs is they can now call your own code. You can give it access to your functions, your tools, and it can start performing those on behalf of the user. So we're going to get a taste of that, and hopefully that gets the wheels turning in the back of your head of, like, what is possible, what you can build in your own applications. Okay, and .NET Crowd, yes, C#? Yeah, okay, cool, great. So let's dive in. Before I show code, and it's going to be mostly code, I do want to set some foundational concepts that are core to Semantic Kernel and what I believe are important to know if you're doing any kind of AI development. Now, in Semantic Kernel, we have three terms: plugins, planners, personas. You're going to hear me say these things over and over again. Plugins, planners, personas. If I was in a rowdier crowd, I would have y'all chant it with me. These things are called all sorts of fun things inside of the industry. So I'm sorry for y'all that just took a picture. Take another one. So plugins is what we call the code, the capabilities that you can give to an AI for it to do work on behalf of you. You might hear these being referred to as tools. That's what OpenAI calls them now. Functions, that's what OpenAI used to call them. And extensions, which is what my company, Microsoft, calls them. Next, we have planners. Okay, so you've given me some tools. Now I need to do something with it as the AI. I have to come up with a plan. I have to execute something. The industry has converged on something called function calling. Don't know what that is. Don't worry about it. We'll see what that looks like in a bit. And then lastly, okay, great. I have some tools. I have a brain, so I can actually use them. But to what end? Who am I? As an AI, you have to tell the AI you are a developer, you are a customer support representative, you are, insert blank here. We call that a persona in Semantic Kernel. The rest of the industry, you might hear, like, oh, you're building an agent, so you have to give it, like, some instructions. Microsoft has copilots, there's assistants, there's GPTs, there's all these different things where you have to provide it kind of what is its purpose in life, what is it supposed to actually do with these tools, so that when it starts interacting with humans or other agents or systems, it knows what to do. Okay. So we already kind of dived into some of this. A plugin, it's your code. You can connect it with all these things. That's amazing. Actually, real quick, while we're here, how many of y'all are familiar with the term RAG, retrieval augmented generation? Okay, we have quite a few people. Okay, cool. So most people, when they get started, they do RAG. For the other folks in this crowd not familiar with what RAG is, the AIs themselves are smart, but they don't know current things, and they obviously don't know your own, like, internal customer data or system data. So you have to, like, whisper in its ears, like, hey, this is who Matthew is. This is his biography. This is how you sell him widget 100, right? And so what most people do when they get started, when they build their first plugin, their first tool, their first function, is they just write a plugin to retrieve data, right? We'll be showing you how to create plugins that actually do real work, real automation, doing something in the real world. So those are plugins. We talked about planners. We'll see what that looks like in a bit. And personas, right? Describing what your job is in life combined with those plugins. We can now do something. Okay. So those are the three concepts. Got that right? Plugins, planners, personas. We're going to see what all of this looks like in code in a little bit. But first, I mentioned this magical thing called function calling. Ooh, function calling. Most people, you'd be surprised that even like a year in, even at Microsoft, even like 2 years in of doing AI development, they still don't understand how function calling works. And they beat themselves over the head like, how do I get this AI to actually perform actions? You are all going to be gifted with this knowledge. And I will be asking y'all, no matter if you're using Semantic Kernel or just the raw APIs or whatever you're doing, preach to tell others about function calling, because it is the magic that these AIs use to actually perform real work, and is what's actually baked natively into the models. So if you aren't using function calling for automation purposes, you are not taking advantage of the probably hundreds of millions of dollars that these companies are spending to train their models to actually use this feature. Okay. So actually, while I have y'all, I'm just going to show y'all. You know, I love just like looking at raw docs sometimes, because we can see what the actual API looks like. Okay, so platform. So if you go to OpenAI, the same concept exists inside of Google's or AWS models. They have this thing called function calling, where you have to do this dance. And as part of this dance, you tell the AI, these are the functions that you can call. And then when you ask the AI, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z, it will tell you the application, hey, that function, that tool you told me, that plugin you told me about, yeah, call that one and call it with those parameters. So the way that looks in practice, let's go ahead and go back to my lovely slideware, is this is what the actual, this is kind of small. This is what the actual API request looks like. But you have what we call a prompt at the very top, which is just like the conversation back and forth. Hey, I need help. Oh, how can I help you? Oh, can you tell me the current weather? And at the bottom here are the plugins or the tools, which is just the descriptions of those functions. In this case, you can't read it, but you just trust me. It says, this is a tool that gets the weather. And it has 2 inputs, the location, and do you want Fahrenheit or Celsius? And that is enough for the AI to then perform that tool call. And so this is my like nice little pictorial picture of what's actually going behind the scenes. You have your prompt here. In this case, please create me an email for the customer. You can provide multiple functions or tools as part of this payload, this request to the API. In this case, I'm saying get weather or send email. And this is what I think is so magical about function calling. In the olden days, when you had to build like chatbots and stuff, how many of y'all had to like build like decision trees and intent detections, and you had to like pull out features? Okay, I see some hands, and the people raising their hands are like, oh yeah, that was awful. It was bad. All of this is now one API call. Because what the AI does is first decides, okay, cool. They want me to write an email. I should probably use the send email function. And, oh, I need to provide who it's for, the subject, the body, all these obvious things, right? But if the AI realizes, oh, actually, this information, this conversation doesn't have all the information I need, these required parameters, the AI will then go, hey, can you tell me who this is for? Can you tell me what the subject is? Previously, you had to write all this crazy logic of like, okay, yeah, the intent is send email. The intent requires these parameters. Does it exist in all of these different places? No. Okay, and we have to loop back up and ask the user a question. These LLMs now, you just provided the functions, and it decides, yep, I know what the intent is. Yep, I know what the required parameters are. Oops, they're not here. I'm going to ask the user again. And so in this simple request, most likely what would happen, probably like 99% of the time, the assistant would say, hey, I'd love to help, but can you please provide me this additional information first? Now let's imagine there's some like extra content up here where the user says, oh, it's for my boss and it's for this like magical report that I need to send off. Can you tell them how I'm missing the due date? In that case, the agent does have all the required information. And so it can call, that's why it's called function calling, the AI will call that method and slot fill, provide the required parameters that you said were necessary when you gave it those functions. Okay. That gets added to this chat history. Okay, so now as part of the transcript, what's been written down into stone as this interaction between the human and the agent. Hey, the human said, hey, I want to create an email. The assistant says, hey, can you actually send the email? I can't do it, but can you do it for me? Your application now needs to actually grab that function, take those input parameters, and invoke it. And once it's invoked, there's probably some return like a status 200. Yeah, I sent the email, or oh, the recipient doesn't exist, or whatever it is. You get a result of that tool. And then you as a developer then need to add that again to that chat history, that transcript of everything that's transpired. So now we have 3 messages. The user saying, hey, I want to create an email. The assistant saying, can you please send an email? And then the system, your application saying, yes, I have actually sent the email. And once that's done, you can give that transcript back to the AI, and the AI can look at it and go, okay, I did my job. I called the send email tool. Someone has told me that I succeeded. And so the assistant can create one more message saying, hey, the email has been sent. Is there anything else you would like me to do today? Okay. So that is function calling. Now, if you had to develop this yourself, it becomes very challenging, especially in C# where everything's strongly typed, right? Because you have to take your existing functions. Either you're handcrafting the JSON schema spec of saying, oh, these are the 5 inputs, these are the ones that are required. That's tedious. So then you get, oh, I'm going to dynamically generate this schema. So now you're doing a bunch of reflection. You're having to add like description attributes to everything. Oh my God. Oh, I'm writing thousands of lines of code. And okay, and then you finally describe the function so that you can actually give it to the AI. When the AI does the function call, it's just a gigantic string. And so now you're having to extract the values out. So you have to marshal it to the right types. You have to find the right function, invoke it, pray that everything works. And then once you have the function result, you can give it back to the AI and you can do that loop. That's a lot of work. And that, folks, is why Semantic Kernel exists. Yeah. Because what we're about to see, I'm finally going to jump to code, is instead of you having to code all this stuff up yourself, all you have to do is say, this is my C# function. AI, this is yours now. Have fun. Go automatically invoke it for me whenever the user has a request. Okay. So let's see what that looks like. And how am I doing on time? Perfect. Okay. So if we come to my application, I said in the description I would start from a blank project. I lied. I'm semi-blank. I want to get the key things for y'all though. So whenever you are starting off with Semantic Kernel, the thing that you need to start with is the kernel itself. And let's make this screen a little bit bigger for y'all folks. Can y'all see? It's kind of blurry. It's good enough. Okay. I hope y'all can see. So the first thing that you need to do is create a kernel. Since you're on C# land, you're probably familiar with builders. So we have this thing called kernel.createBuilder, and you can start adding services. People always ask me, like, what is the kernel? It's just a fancy DI container. That's all it is. And the reason why we modeled it off as a DI container is it makes it really easy for you to do dependency injection of your functions, of your plugins. right? We'll see what that looks like in a bit. I'm adding some stuff just to make my demo work. And probably the most important line that I have written right now is adding logging. So we'll be actually able to see what the AI is doing as it's doing its work once we get started coding. Okay, so this is some boilerplate semantic kernel stuff. The real magic starts to happen when we start actually interacting with the AI models. So that means I need to add a AI model to my kernel. So I'm going to do that by going to line 44. And we're going to do kernel builder dot add OpenAI chat completion. Okay. And what we need to do is provide the model that we're going to use. So I want to go ahead and use the latest and greatest, which is 4.0. And we want to go ahead and provide an API key. This is fake, but I've wired it up in the back end so that it'll actually work. So this is what it's like to actually add my OpenAI service. So pretty simple. The value of the semantic kernel at this point is, obviously I can add OpenAI models, but if I want to, I could also add models from Azure. We also have connectors for AWS, for Google. If you're trying to run models locally on your machine, you might be using something like Ollama. So what's nice is you're learning one SDK, one framework, and then you can connect it with all of the top model providers that are out there. And then everything else downstream of this application works identically, right? So if tomorrow you're like, oh, Claude actually has a better model than OpenAI. I don't want to spend any more money with Microsoft. Please don't do that. I'm going to move over. You just have to change a few lines of code, right? So there's that. Next, we want to actually add our plugins. We actually want to give the descriptions to the AI of what is possible that it can do on behalf of the user. So I am going to, actually, you know, we're going to skip this part. We're going to skip this part because I want to show you all what it looks like when the AI doesn't have functions, okay? So we will come back, and in the meantime, we will go ahead and build our kernel. So we do kernel equals kernel builder.build. Oh. Build. And we want to go ahead and get our iChat completion service out from our kernel. Look, it looks exactly like a DI container. Wow. Okay, cool. And then we can actually start a conversation with our AI agent. So I'll go ahead and create a new chat history. That's, if you remember my diagram, that was that transcription that was there. We've got a new chat history. It's telling me we can make it look prettier. And then we can actually start that chat loop. So I'm just going to copy and paste some code. And I'll kind of describe what's going on in here so it doesn't feel like witchcraft. Okay, cool. Okay, so while true, we're going to collect the user's input. We're going to read line. Nothing shocking there. I'm actually going to delete this right here. This is where we actually invoke the AI. So let's make this a little bit smaller. So the function is called, in this case, get streaming chat messages, because I don't know if you have all these ChatGPT, how it like streams the messages back to you. It's like, oh wow, it's thinking on the fly. So we want that functionality. So we want to stream back. We're going to send in 2 bits of information, the chat history, that transcription that's happened so far, which is currently empty, and the kernel, which has all those plugins available for me. Okay. And then once we get a response back, we can actually stream it back to the user. So here we just have a for loop around that stream that comes back, and we can print the message to the screen. Nothing too fancy. But if I go ahead and click run, and cross my fingers that I didn't have any typos, it should come up, and we can start talking to this agent or this AI. Okay. And then as I'm doing this, if y'all have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I've been told there is a mic that we can. Oh, we have a question in the back. Go for it. Yeah. You can project. Okay, go for it. Yes. That's because that's a good question. Oh, you have an eagle eye. Uh, if I hit enter here, nothing is going to work. Hello. It doesn't know what I'm doing because I forgot a line. Oh my god. You saved me. I would have been like, what is going on here? It's not working. I would have started sweating. Okay. Okay, so as he correctly called out, we have to actually add the user's message to the history. So now when I say hello, it'll say hello back. Hello, how can I assist you today? Perfect, thank you. Oh, okay, cool. We've all seen that. And then what's also happening here is after the assistant has sent a response, we are also adding that back to the chat history so that we can kind of go back and forth. Now, a challenge is now if I start asking it to do things that's not part of the model, it's going to start getting confused or saying, ah. So if I ask, what is the current time? It's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't do any of that stuff for you. But we're all developers. We know how to get the current time from code, and it's super simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide that as a plugin, as a tool, as a function to the AI. Okay, so we're going to go back to that line of code where I said, we're going to skip out of those plugins and add our very first plugin. Okay, let's make this a little bit smaller. And this one, I wanted to kind of show just how simple it can be to add a skill, a tool, a plugin, a function. In just 3 lines of code, we're saying we're adding some new plugins from an array of functions. So it's just one function here. The name of the plugin is called date time helper. So we're telling the AI, hey, you have some helpers to get the date time. And we create a function from a method and this method. And all it does is get the current time. And we are telling the AI, hey, the name of this function is now, and here's the description of the function. It gets the current date and time. Cool. So like I said, in just like 3 lines of code, we have this function. If we go ahead and refresh my application, now when I ask, hey, what's the current time, it's actually going to invoke that function. Let's see. I want to come. Ooh. Let's try again. Okay. What is the current time? Okay. Wait, I forgot one more thing. There's always one more thing. So I showed y'all the, let's make this a little bit smaller real quick. I showed y'all the response method. For us to actually have it call our methods, we want to basically give it permission to do so. Because that could be dangerous if it just has access to plugins and can do whatever the heck it wants. So what we're telling it is you have some settings where you now can automatically invoke these functions. Okay, so I'll refresh it again. Just do a quick time check. Okay, we're done good. And now if we get the results. It should work. There we go. Okay, so what is the current time? And we'll get a response. Current time is November 7th. Wow. Okay. So I mentioned one of the most important lines was the logging line. And from there, we can actually start seeing what the AI was doing. So what we have down here is my debug screen. And we can see that what it was able to do is it went ahead and called a function called datetime helpers, right? We named it datetime helpers. It used the now function. This had no input parameter, so it's like, whatever, fine, it's empty. It invoked it. That function returned what we asked it to do, which was the current time. And that's what we gave back to the AI, which allowed it to then respond with the current time. Okay. So I asked earlier how many of you have done RAG. y'all have probably done RAG with like company documents and a bunch of fancy stuff. This is still RAG. You're retrieving information. Yes, it's silly information. It's just the current time, but it's giving the AI information that it didn't otherwise know about, so it could augment, right? Retrieve, augment its generated response, RAG. Okay. I think I saw a hand raised over there.
So my question is, as far as I could interpret it, the model identifies which function to call by the descriptive string that like this tells the time. If I imagine that this would then replace some kind of rich integration of a huge API, which you have a bunch of like tens and maybe hundreds of methods, and they may have some similarities because some maybe for edge cases, etc. So my question is, do you have experience that this may become tricky to actually get the model to find the function that you actually wanted to execute? Because if you have a integration of one or two functions, it's probably very straightforward. But if you imagine, okay, I want this to replace my super large integration that I built around the last couple of years, so and it has like hundreds of methods in there. What is your experience around that?
That is a great question. So to repeat back to y'all, what happens if I give it 100 functions? Does it still work? So the API say you can give it, I think like 256 functions. I do not recommend anyone ever doing that, at least in the current state of the models, because you're right, it kind of just gets overwhelmed and starts hallucinating and does all sorts of bad stuff. The sweet spot that I found is about a half a dozen to a dozen functions, depending on the complexity of the function. So if you're giving it a bunch of simple things like, what's the current date? And do some simple math operations, you can actually do like several dozen of them because they don't have any complex inputs. What we're about to see is to turn on a light bulb. It's deceptively simple, but it might actually require several different parameters. Is it on? How bright is it? What color is it? And if you have functions that require fairly complex input objects, then you are adding to the cognitive load to the AI, and there's fewer functions it can handle. And that's when I say like, oh, you probably want to just do half a dozen to a dozen. Then to your question, like, yeah, but I need it to automate hundreds of functions. Like, that's unacceptable. What am I supposed to do? So if y'all come to my session tomorrow, what I'll be teaching y'all is where the research is going now is instead of building like a monolithic agent AI that does everything, that does all 100 functions, you actually create really tiny itty bitty agents. And they do one thing really, really well. So I'm building like my home automation agent. There might be I don't know. Your services have a bunch of different endpoints that do targeted different things. You probably end up creating microservices of agents that do very targeted things. And then you have a router agent, something that sits on top, that says, oh, I got a question about billing. I'm going to send it to the billing agent that has the 6 billing APIs. Oh, this is about new customer ingestion. I'm going to send it to the new account agent that has the 6 APIs for new accounts. That's how you start architecting your applications so that you're not overwhelming the AI. Great question, great question. So while he was asking that question, I went ahead and added 2 additional plugins, another grounding plugin called Bing, and I also wanted to show you what it was like to perform actual real-world interactions. Now, if I hadn't flown halfway around the world to get here, I would have like a light bulb with me on stage, and I'm like, oh wow, it changed colors. Instead, y'all just get a web page that changes colors. So I'm sorry, y'all, but it'll communicate what's going on. So y'all just have to deal with me. And if we look at that plugin, this is a little bit more advanced, as kind of I mentioned before. This is an entire class that we are injecting into our kernel. You can see it even has this WebSocket Lite server that I'm using dependency injection to inject into my plugin. So this is my favorite part about Semantic Kernel, is how much it loves dependency injection. And then we can see the functions. So we have a function for getting the list of lights. We get a function for getting the current state of the light bulbs, and another one to change the state. And the first two are pretty simple, right? This one has no input parameters. This one just takes in an ID. But the next one, actually changing the state, it takes in two parameters: the current ID of the light that wants to be changed and a complex model. So in this case, light state model, which is described here. And it has three input parameters, or three properties: on, brightness, and the hex value. And I like showing this because even though this is kind of a toy sample, it's showing that Semantic Kernel can take a complex object like this and use reflection to describe it to the AI. And when the AI provides the JSON schema for light model, it's actually able to unpack that and call this function correctly. Okay. So I've added that to the AI. And so now what I can do is I can ask a question like, what is the current weather in... So I was in Copenhagen and I was talking to the taxi rider and I was like, hey, can you drive me to this city? And I pronounced it so bad that he didn't know what I was talking about. I was like, the one across the bridge. So I refused to say the name of the city I'm currently in because apparently it's unintelligible from an American. Okay. Use Bing to tell me. Oh, did I actually hit the reset button? I think so. Okay. And let's just do a quick time check. So we have 8 minutes. So while we're waiting for this final demo to get pulled up, any other questions?
Voice recognition and then do like present it back in audio as well.
Okay. So if I had more time, I would show you how to enable this little recorder button. Semantic Kernel does integrate with the latest like voice to text, text to voice models. But even that I think is boring, and you shouldn't do that. So what I actually recommend people do, let's just quickly change this light. Change the light to pink. Let's see. Okay, and we can see that what it did is it got the lights, it got the list of light IDs, it then called the change state light, and it populated the ID and the colors, and it changed it. And if we come back over here, turn the light on, it changes to pink, but it didn't actually turn it on. Aha! And we can see it turned pink. Okay. Right, okay. So you can imagine it does some actual automation. Going back to your question, though, I could talk to this thing. I could, and you saw me type to this thing. But this is still requiring some poor human sitting in front of some digital device, wasting their precious seconds of life, telling this AI, instructing it to do something. This is not the future we've been promised. We've been promised a future where these things just automatically do things for us and make us happy without us even knowing. We're like little pets, right? That's what we want. That's what we want. And so the last actual demo that I want to show y'all is kind of a teaser again for tomorrow. So I'm just going to change a value here and restart this. Is what if we lived in a world where there was no text box? Oh. Look, there's no text box. It's gone. I deleted it. So ideally, what you want to do is have these AIs triggered by events. Like all of you are running APIs and services that are spewing off events everywhere. Oh, this new customer, new order, new product, like all this stuff is happening in the background. Instead of having some poor human read this information from a screen, walk over to the AI and say, hey, please help me. Just automatically call the AI and have it perform work. And so what I've done in this last scenario is I have connected it to this to-do list. Yeah, so this is probably a bad example. Some poor human still having to type to-dos, right? Because, again, this is just for demonstrative purposes. And I can come to this to-do list, and I can refresh that. Uncheck this task. This acts as an event to the AI, and we can see it's starting to think because it just got to that event. And now when I come back, we can see that the AI was able to turn it to green because that was the task that was just assigned to it. And my favorite part is the AI, because I actually gave it the ability to edit tasks, is once it was done, it actually automatically turned that task done, completed it. And so it's been striked out. And so that's really where I want to encourage y'all to go. Yes, audio is cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. Yes, you could talk to it. You could talk to it. And yes, this again, that example. Someone also had to type it to do. But y'all have systems that don't require humans to type things. Use that. Use that. That drives real leverage. That drives real productivity. Because the last thing you want to do is have someone sit in front of a keyboard or a microphone. But yes, microphones are very cool. Use the real-time APIs that were just released. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
He was actually having the AI to read his email up for him and saying, okay, well, pick this email. I want to reply to this and reply with this text. And the email wrote it to him and then it sent it off. And so he was able to work while talking, while driving his bike to the work. So that's where I'm heading.
Yeah.
To have the audio interface in both ways.
Yes, so we're at time, I think. So in terms of audio, OpenAI just released what they're calling the real-time audio APIs, which are being integrated in Semantic Kernel right now. They're perfect for this. I don't know if y'all have used audio speech-to-text APIs before, but typically what you would have to do is you'd have to say a complete sentence, wait. The AI would do its thing. It'd come back and it would start talking to you. And if you're like, no, stop, don't, it would just keep talking over you, right? We've all experienced that with Siri or whatever Google's thing is called. The new real-time APIs from OpenAI, as you're speaking, all of that data is immediately going to the model. So as soon as you're done talking, it can start responding back to you. And when you interrupt it, it will stop. And just like how I showed how you can curate this transcript of chat history, those APIs are smart enough to take those interruptions in, kind of those ums, ahs, and turn it into a cohesive transcript so that the AI can actually help you and perform function calls to do things like send emails on behalf of someone. So the future is now. Definitely check out those APIs as well. So I think we're at time. I'm so sorry I didn't leave. Actually, one more question. Any other questions? One more in the back. GitHub URL, yes. Actually, I'm just going to recommend y'all go to the Semantic Kernel repo. If y'all Google Semantic Kernel, this is the first thing that will pop up. I should have given y'all some a URL, but great docs on how to get started. Google Semantic Kernel, and since y'all are .NET devs, inside of the GitHub repo for Semantic Kernel, if you go to .NET and then samples, tons of getting started stuff for you to check out. Tomorrow, if y'all come to my session, we'll be going deeper into process automation, actually completing tasks. And so we're going to check out some of the getting started with processes samples. So if you want to decide if you're interested in showing back up tomorrow to see how can you automate more complex workflows, check out those samples and we'll be looking at them tomorrow. All righty. Cheers, y'all. Thank you.